What can he achieve in this game, and are we quick to judge him at just 16?
I don't think so, no. I think he's the best young 16 player I've ever seen in my life.
What is it in the few years that we've seen him so far that Luke's done so right?
Obviously, he's practiced all his life. I mean, he was a little kid when he was practicing. I think he was about 2 years old. What's good for his forte, for me, is he's not money-orientated.
The greatest darts player who ever lived built his entire career on one belief, that nobody could beat him because nobody would outwork him. A teenager from Warrington has just made that belief look small. Luke Littler sat on his phone for 2.5 hours at an exhibition, refused to pick up a dart, walked up to the ockey and dismantled the reigning world champion 8-1. What Phil Taylor said when he watched it happen is the closest the man with 16 world titles has ever come to admitting that he is looking at something he himself could not do. And the way Taylor has framed Luke Littler since then is the part of the story almost nobody outside the sport has paid attention to.
I was there, I was like the guest speaker, whatever, and Luke sat there for about 2.5 hours on his phone. At Chester Races it was, he's playing Luke Humphries. Luke's practicing like mad.
Yeah.
And I said, "Are you going to practice then, Luke?" He went, "Nah." He goes up and beats him 8-1.
The contrast at the heart of this story has to be understood before any of it makes sense. Phil Taylor did not become Phil Taylor through talent alone. He became Phil Taylor through obsession. Eric Bristow loaned him £10,000 in 1986 to turn professional, and across the next 3 decades, Taylor practiced more, travelled more, and won more than any darts player in history. 2 BDO world titles, 14 PDC world titles, 21 world finals overall, 14 consecutive finals between 1994 and 2007, 87 major titles, 11 televised, 9 dart finishes. The pattern across every single one of those numbers was the same. He outworked the room, which makes what he has been saying about Luke Littler since late 2023 genuinely strange. On the 4th of December 2023, Phil Taylor sat down with Sky Sports for a long interview about the state of the game. 11 days remained before the World Championship. Asked who would win, Taylor picked Michael van Gerwen and called him a wounded tiger. Then a name surfaced that the wider darts world had no reason to remember. Luke Littler was very good, Taylor said. He was 16. The real test would arrive at 18 or 19 when the young player had a few pounds in his pocket, because that was when the discipline mattered. Luke needed a good manager, and if Taylor were the one looking after him, the first piece of advice would be a single warning: don't you dare. Read that quote again with what came later in mind, because the most successful darts player of all time was already watching a teenager nobody else was watching, and the very first thing he flagged was not the lad's ceiling, it was his lifestyle. 11 days later, the 2024 PDC World Darts Championship began at Alexandra Palace. Luke Littler walked on at 66-1. Some fans had taken him at 300-1 before the tournament. The first round opponent was Christian Kist. Across that opening performance, Littler averaged 106.12 and landed 7 180s, and the odds collapsed from 66-1 down to 10-1 inside a single match. Wayne Mardle, working on Sky's commentary team, posted on social media that Littler might be the most naturally talented player he had ever watched. After the quarter-final, Mardle went further on air. There were not enough words. 16-year-olds did not perform like this. They did not act like him. The phrase he reached for was darting freak, immediately framed as a term of endearment. Andrew Gilding, Matt Campbell, Raymond van Barneveld, Brendan Dolan and Rob Cross fell in sequence. And on the 3rd of January 2024, Luke Littler walked out for the world final against Luke Humphries. The lead reached 4-2. From there, Humphries averaged 103.67 across the rest of the contest, a record for a final of that length, and won 7-4. £200,000 went to Littler in defeat. His ranking surged from a world number 164 into the top 32. Sky Sports announced that 4.8 million viewers had tuned in, with a peak of 3.71 million standing as the highest figure Sky had ever recorded for a non-football sporting event. The cautious Phil Taylor of December 2023 disappeared after that final. The Phil Taylor who replaced him is the one this story is really about. By May 2024, Taylor was on talkSPORT calling Littler absolutely fantastic. He admitted he loved that Littler had got the backs up of the other pros. He confessed he had not really been watching darts before this kid arrived, that he had not really been interested. Then came a line that, at the time, sounded like a darts legend being kind to a teenager. A great little player, Taylor called him. A great little personality, one that had not been affected yet, and one Taylor did not think ever would be. What Taylor was actually noticing was a temperament he had spent his own career envying. The clearest version of the argument arrived after the Grand Slam of darts on the 17th of November 2024. Luke Littler dismantled Martin Lukeman 16-3 with a 104.99 average and a tournament record 6180s. He was 17. Speaking to Casino Reviews and quoted by GB News, Phil Taylor delivered the prediction that would either define his judgment or destroy it. The lad would become world #1 soon. Readers could put their money on it. They could put their mortgage on it. Asked if anything could stop him, Taylor used 2 words. Not really. Inside the same set of quotes sat the line that explains why Taylor was so certain. Luke, he argued, was not motivated by money. He simply liked winning. £500,000 for the winner of the World Championship, Taylor said, would not even enter the lad's head. That observation is the first half of what Phil Taylor has been quietly trying to tell the sport for 2 years. Money is the thing that has wrecked more darts careers than any opponent. Eric Bristow drank his way down the rankings. Players Taylor came up with cash checks and stopped grinding. The brutal logic of professional darts has always been that the prize money rewards the winner, and the winner is usually the one who still needs to win after they have already won everything. What Phil Taylor said he was watching in Luke Littler was a 17-year-old who would walk onto an Alexandra Palace stage with £500,000 on offer and treat the money like it was not in the room. The second half of the argument is the part that makes professional darts players uncomfortable. In April 2026, on the Double Tops podcast and earlier in conversations relayed by dartsplanet.tv and The Sun, Phil Taylor told an exhibition story he could not stop returning to. The venue was Chester Aces. Taylor was there as a guest. Luke Humphries was practicing like mad, the way Humphries always practices, the way Taylor himself had always practiced. Luke Littler sat on his phone for about 2.5 hours. Taylor asked if he was going to practice. The answer was no. Littler walked up to the board, played Luke Humphries and beat the reigning world champion 8-1. Taylor's reaction, in his own words, was that it was impossible. The man who had built a 16-title career on the discipline of repetition watched the teenager skip the discipline entirely and produce a result Taylor could not explain. The conclusion Taylor drew is the line that should be a documentary on its own. For Luke to do what he is doing with so little practice, Taylor said, shows the amount of talent he has got. That is the closest Phil Taylor has come, in public, to admitting that the thing he is looking at is not the thing he himself was. He has framed it carefully. He has wrapped it in jokes and warnings. Before the 2026 World Championship, talking to The Sun, Taylor described asking Luke whether he was taking a practice board to London. The answer was no. Taylor's verdict was that Luke had not fully practiced as he should, but that if he got past the first round, he would fly. On the Double Tops podcast in April 2026, the warning sharpened. He needs to practice more, Taylor said. He literally doesn't practice. The implication, for anyone who has watched darts for the last 30 years, is enormous. Phil Taylor's whole career was the argument that the practice board wins championships. Luke Littler is the first player Phil Taylor has ever described in public as winning championships in spite of the practice board. The first time around, in 2024, when he urged Sky Sports to pick Luke for the Premier League, Phil Taylor called it a no-brainer and asked why the broadcaster would turn up its noses at a surefire ratings winner. Behind that column sat the thing Taylor had already worked out. Talent at this level had not walked into the PDC since Taylor himself had been the talent. The 2025 World Darts Championship opened on the 15th of December 2024 with Littler installed as a 15-8 favourite at Paddy Power. Ryan Meikle, Ian White, Ryan Joyce and Nathan Aspinall fell in turn, and Stephen Bunting went down 6-1 in the semi-final. The final, on Friday the 3rd of January 2025, paired Littler with Michael van Gerwen, the same player who had told Viaplay that the Littler hype was unfair to Luke Humphries. Luke Littler won 7 sets to 3. 17 years and 347 days old, he stood as the youngest world champion in darts history, and the cheque ran to £500,000. Phil Taylor's reaction to GB News went straight to records and straight to the question of money. If Luke wanted to beat his 16 world titles, the lad could go ahead and do it. Difficulty was the only obstacle because winning 16 titles meant reaching a lot of finals. Then arrived the line that took on a life of its own. Darts had gone crazy, Taylor said, and you would not believe the difference since young Luke came along. March 2025 brought the UK Open, and Littler dismantled James Wade 11-2. Phil Taylor, speaking to dartsnews.com after the tournament, fired off the second great prediction. If Luke remembered to live a boring life for the next 20 years, if he steered clear of nightclubs and booze and fast cars and all the normal vices for an 18-year-old, the sky was the limit. The phrase Taylor reached for was live like a monk. Make those sacrifices, he argued, and Luke could break all sorts of records. A 120 average in a major final, he added, was only a matter of time. Notice what Taylor has stopped saying by this point. He has stopped saying the lad needs to practice more in order to win. He is saying the lad needs to stay disciplined off the board because the gift on it is already there. The 2026 World Championship arrived next, and Luke Littler started it as the odds-on favourite. Darius Labanauskas went first. Rob Cross fell with one set claimed at an average of 125.25. Krzysztof Ratajski went 5-0 in the quarter-final, sealed by a 170 finish. Stephen Bunting fell in the semi. On Saturday, the 3rd of January 2026, Gian van Veen stood across the ockey in the final, and Luke Littler beat him 7-1. The averages told the story: 106.02 on the match, 16 180s, 19 140s, a 147 finish on double 15. Across the entire tournament, 73 180s landed, an award the PDC nicknamed the Ballon d'Or. 4 sets dropped in 7 matches stood as the fewest by a world champion since Phil Taylor himself in 2010. The check came to £1 million, the biggest prize in the history of the sport. Luke Littler became the 4th man to retain the PDC world title, joining Phil Taylor, Adrian Lewis and Gary Anderson. 6 days later, Target Darts announced a new 10-year deal with Littler worth £20 million across its term, which the Press Association described as the most lucrative agreement the sport had ever seen. By that point, Sporting Life had Littler's career prize money sitting just over £3,700,000. He had been a professional for almost exactly 2 years. Here is where the second half of Phil Taylor's read on Luke Littler matters most. A 19-year-old has just signed the biggest deal in darts history, banked the biggest single check the sport has ever paid out, and watched his career earnings cross £3.5 million before his 20th birthday. Almost any sport will tell you what that combination usually does to a player. The grind gets softer, the hunger goes. The next title takes a year longer than the last one. Phil Taylor told GB News in November 2024 that none of that was going to happen because the money was not what was driving Luke. Luke just liked winning. £500,000 for a world championship would not enter his head. 18 months later, with the prize money tripled and the sponsorship deal multiplied, Luke Littler is still winning. February 2026 delivered the Windmill World Masters, and Luke Littler beat Luke Humphries 6-5. The man on the receiving end was the same player who had taken the 2024 final, the same player who had thanked Phil Taylor in his 2025 Premier League speech. His post-match verdict closed the argument. He told Luke at the end he did not think he had a heart because he never folded under pressure. "You tried your hardest to put him under it," Humphries said, "but he never folded. Premature it might be, but Humphries called Luke Littler the greatest darts player who had ever lived." Phil Taylor, the man with the 16 world titles Humphries was implicitly signing over, was not in the room. The line had already been delivered again and again since November 2024. The talent was unprecedented. The lad did not practice. The money did not move him. Each of those 3 statements, on its own, would have been a strange thing for Phil Taylor to say about anyone. Put together, they describe a player who breaks the model Phil Taylor himself built the sport on, and they describe him in the voice of the only person whose verdict on a darts player has ever been the final word. The nobody listened framing is not absolute. Eddie Hearn listened in early 2024 and put Littler in the Premier League. Gerwyn Price listened by November 2024 when his Instagram post described facing players at their best and finding Luke Littler levels above. Wayne Mardle listened from round 1. Humphries listened by February 2026. What makes the story land is that the part of Taylor's argument the sport found easy to repeat was the part about Luke being good. The part the sport quietly did not want to admit was the part about how good and the part about why. Phil Taylor has not said that Luke Littler is more talented than he was. The man with 16 titles is too proud and too sharp to put it in those words. What he has said is that a teenager beat the reigning world champion 8-1 in an exhibition after refusing to practice, and that he, Phil Taylor, looked at it and could not explain how. He has said the world championship prize money does not enter Luke's head. He has said that with the right discipline off the board, the lad could break all sorts of records. He has said that nothing really was going to stop him. The titles, the £1 million cheque, the £20 million deal, the back-to-back world finals, and the sitting world champion publicly calling Luke Littler the greatest of all time are the receipts on every part of it. The talent landed, the temperament held, the money did not slow him down. The man who built the modern PDC by outworking everyone in the room watched a teenager arrive who did not need to, and the one voice that said it out loud belonged to Phil Taylor, while the rest of the sport was still working out whether to believe him.